What's up, everyone? Welcome to the My Favorite Horror Movie podcast. I'm your host, Christian Ackerman. There are some choppers probably in the background. There are riots going on in the city of Los Angeles, actually kind of just south of me. I'm in Hollywood, a few miles south on Melrose, and, due to this, the protests for George Floyd. So hopefully everyone's safe out there. We have a badass versus episode for you today. It is screenwriters versus producers. This one will be endlessly inspirational to you all if you're looking for understanding into the secrets behind the mindsets of writers and producers and how they work together. Between Buz Wallick, Rolfe Kanefsky, Josh Miller, and I, we've probably made over 100 movies, not together, but, separately and sometimes together. Before we get into it, as a podcast listener, you can use the coupon code podcast at myfavoritehorrormovie.com for 20% off of any of our signed books, or head over to amazon.com and pick up the books there. And please subscribe, click, and all that to keep me inspired to keep this going. So let's start off by touching base with prolific filmmaker Buz Wallick, and then we'll add in badasses Rolfe Kanefsky and Josh Miller to face off in this episode's main event, screenwriters versus producers. And then also just announced after we had recorded this a few days ago, Josh is now going to be the writer of the new Sonic the Hedgehog movie. He wrote the first one, and now he's writing the second one, so congratulations to Josh on that. It's great news. So I wish it was the announcement happened after or before, but otherwise he wouldn't have been able to talk about it anyway. So we'll just leave it at that. Proud of him, and so let's get on with this. Screenwriters versus producers. Let's go. All right, so our first guest is a badass producer, director, and former director of photography, whose credits include Downward Twin, which is currently streaming on Netflix, Never Sleep Again, Crystal Lake Memories, His Name Was Jason. He got to do 2 Friday the 13th documentaries. Death House, Psycho Granny, and the upcoming documentary Analog Love. It's Buz Wallick. What's up, Buz?
Hi.
How's it going, man? What you been up to in the past 2 months worth of quarantining?
Staying busy, doing a lot of stuff with my hands. I wanted to, make sure I was living it up while stuck in quarantine. So, just did a whole bunch of housework. But also, I shot a short in quarantine, which was fun.
Really?
Just, I was trying to keep busy, trying to write and just be creative. You got to have that sieve to let all the demons up here get out into something. Just staying as busy as I can be. I run a thing called an artist accountability group called Just Scare Me, in which every 2 months you have to direct a short horror film between 1 and 10 minutes, or you owe the group $100.
Oh, wow!
Don't do it. It's like I gotta do something. And it's not a competition. It is purely a let's go to gym, do some weightlifting, let's flex the muscles, and just make sure we're constantly in a place of like doing something. And so, I had a couple of people, once all this started, we were in our second round of the year, and I decided, I was like, all right, I'm going to give everyone a chance. You can drop out now, after signing up. You're normally I'm like, no, you said yes. So now you're stuck, and you're going to go owe everyone $100.
Yeah.
So I gave everyone a chance to drop out, and a few people did, but a lot of people were just like, no, I need something to do. So they're just like, no, I'm gonna shoot something. And so we're gonna do an online screening through a website I found that syncs up stuff through Vimeo. So we're gonna do it on June 6th, since we can't.
Oh, cool. Listen. Yeah, send me the info. I'll check it out. And so what is the short? I assume it's starring your wife, Mary.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. You're quarantining with an actor. You might as well utilize that, right?
Yeah. And we had a couple of friends that we had, our quarantine circle, as they call it. That, we've only seen like 3 or 4 people through the entire 2 months. That's the only human, and that they've only seen us. So I was like, hey, you guys want to hang out and we shoot something this weekend? And so we shot mine and another one of my friends, like, just at the same time. Just did it all in one thing.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, it worked out. It worked out really nicely. It's amazing what you can kind of figure out what you can do with literally just you and like one other body, and minimal lights and camera, and just make it work. So it was nice. You know, we were very
Yeah.
fortunate that we had the stuff to do that.
Yeah, that's great to. I mean, you have to stay busy, and I mean, it's kind of now is the perfect time to do it. I mean, you're always busy doing something. I'm always busy doing something, and so it's been really nice to just focus on me, and I'm sure
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Um, so just just like you were joining with your friends, probably the horror circle friends that a lot of us, both of us may know. Um, uh, what is it like this community for you? How everyone gets together and helps each other, and are there times that you see someone and they're like, why didn't you cast me in my movie, or why didn't you have me doing this? Like some people can get bitter doing this, or bitter seeing other people do stuff. I mean, kind of explain what it is in LA with this horror community that we're all involved in.
Well, I mean, that's a hard question to ask because on one hand, in one respect, I have this sort of mindset of, well, I don't want to be a part of any club that would have me as a member.
Yeah, me too. Yep.
And then the other part of that is that we are very fortunate that, um, unlike other genres or communities where there is so many more layers in horror, the genre itself is the star.
Mm-hmm.
Like obviously we have our Bruce Campbells and Jamie Lee Curtis's and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
those horror stars. But at the same time, like we go see horror movies because they're a horror movie, not
Yes.
because of anybody's in it. And I mean, obviously we'll go see something with the director, whatnot. But a lot of the time, like if we like the director, that's kind of just the bonus to the
Yeah.
fact
Okay.
that we just start into it being a genre movie. So it is cool that we do have, again, many of us all came from this place of, I mean, just speaking personally here, I came from a small town. I was the only kid that had a Freddy Krueger t-shirt.
Mm.
It was really hard to get my friends to like watch Abbott and Costello meets Frankenstein.
Yeah.
That was kind of like a thing. I liked all this stuff. And then it was finding those letters to the editor in Fangoria magazine. And I was like, there's other people out there. And finding like, way back in the day, the Fangoria forums,
Mm-hmm.
which opened up this whole world of these new friends that was like, oh my God, I'm not alone. And
Yeah.
that's something I cherish still, just coming from a background of being that sort of lonely in my likes kid, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that finding that community was really important. Nowadays, it's unfortunately that specialness has really lost its touch just because everybody likes everything. Everyone knows everything. You can get anything anywhere. There's nothing
Yeah.
special anymore. And I sound like such a hipster saying that, but it does detract a little bit from that feeling. That being said, we've made so many great friends that, can be really supportive. It can also be really cutthroat, but it does always make you strive to do the best you can because you want to impress your peers.
Yes.
They're all
Yeah.
hard people to impress.
Yeah. I mean, we and all of our friends have seen all the horror films, and they know them all,
Yeah.
and you definitely have a lot to live up to. Kind of touching upon your start. And being this kid, the only person that liked horror films where you grew up, um, when you did you I know that you wanted to get into the industry, you wanted to be a filmmaker, but was the ticket for you kind of starting off in journalism and moving out to LA first, or did you, because I know you were writing for a few websites, and that's probably you started with the forums, and you're like, oh, I could probably just write for these websites, or these, or for Fangoria or whatever. And that's how I first knew your name. um, and then you became a filmmaker. Now this is your life. Talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird sort of amalgamation of stuff. I mean, I never thought like, ooh, I want to be a journalist, and then, there was a brief moment where I was like, I could be a journalist, that'd be interesting, but it really came down to the fact that I was just doing a lot of short films in my backyard with my friends, and then Steve Barton, Uncle Creepy, who at the time was the moderator on the forums, and his second in command, John Condit.
Yes.
They both saw some of these shorts and really took a liking to me. Now they're two of my closest friends. But they really sort of took me under their wing and started introducing me to people when I would go to like a Fangoria weekend of horrors at like 14 years old.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So it was those guys that really sort of took me under their wing, and I owe my entire career to both of them. Because without them, I wouldn't have met anybody. So I ended up living with John down in San Diego. We were roommates when I was in college. And I started, I was doing like reviews for dreadcentral.com. Before that, I had done like a little bit of reviews and like video work, like interviews, like just filming interviews for what was then called the Horror Channel. And then that event went, boats up and it became Dread Central. So I got my start doing that, and I was just doing red carpet interviews and little stuff, and then that led me to becoming very, very good friends with Andrew Cash, who was an editor and a journalist at Dread Central, and we just kind of became the heads of video production, and that's all we did. And then that eventually led me into doing electronic press kit, EPK.
Yeah.
And so that to me was the really like what I was like, okay, this is my in, like I'm going in.
Like behind the scenes documentaries for films. That's
yes. So EPK is electronic press kit, and that's the guys and gals that go to film sets and go, hi, what do you do? What's it like working with this actor? And everyone responds with, it's great. We love it. We're having so much fun. But like as soon as I hit stop on the record button, they're like, this is the biggest pile of crap I've ever been on.
Yeah.
Director, I'm probably gonna shoot somebody. It's pretty intense stuff. So that doing the EPK stuff, that was my film school. So I ended up dropping out San Diego State because I was getting work in LA like 3 times.
You were already doing it. Yeah.
I was commuting up to LA, and my Professor Foley, one of my film professors, I went up to him and I was like, hey, I got to miss lab on Thursday because I have a job going on a film set. I can't remember what movie it was, some low budget movie. I have a job going on this film set, and I'm going to be running sound, camera, all this stuff. Like I'm doing what you're going to be teaching in the lab. I just letting you know. And he was like, all right, well, I'm going to have to fail you for the day. And I was like, what?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
You're not going to be there. And I'm like, but I'm doing what you're teaching.
Yeah.
Why are you going to fail me? And he goes, you're not learning it from me.
Oh,
and
damn.
I'm in there in my head going, this doesn't make any sense. So I looked at him in the eye and I said, I pay to be here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm paying you to teach me, and if I don't need you to teach me, why am I paying you at all? And he was like, I don't know, that sounds like your cross to bear. And I was like, right.
Yep, it is.
And I walked out and I called my parents, who are both educators. My dad's a photography teacher, and at the time my mother was a theater teacher at UC Riverside. And I was like, hey, what do you guys think about me dropping out and moving to LA? And they were like, if you want, if you think that's a good idea, maybe just take a semester off, see how it goes. I was like, all right, I'll take a semester off. And it's now been 12 years.
12 years of no more semesters. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So now that you and I have worked together, we worked together on Death House first, and you helped me. You helped connect me to a producer that I worked 2.5 years for just recently. So it's very much appreciative. I'm appreciative for that. Where was I going?
I just gave him your name. You're the one.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, you made the connection. I called you and I asked, hey, is there any work out there? Because it was like we all have those moments where it gets really tough as freelancers. So to have something like that where I could work 2.5 years straight and make 15 movies with someone, it was it was almost like a Roger Corman training to know how to do a ton of low budget films all at once and juggle so much. It was pretty awesome. So you get out of that and you kind of feel like you can do anything.
It's true. I mean, and the Lifetime movie arena is what Roger Corman used to be in the 70s and 80s, and it's the new exploitation genre.
Yeah.
You can turn them out. They sell. They're out there, and there's some fun stuff. Like if you like that, if you like flexing that type of muscle, you can find some real good gems. Some of which I've made.
Yeah, yeah, me
Everyone wants
too.
Psycho Granny. It's on Lifetime right
Yeah,
now.
Psycho Granny on Lifetime. It's always playing. It's always playing. Directed by our friend Rebecca McKendry.
Yeah.
So now, one more question before we bring in the other guys. Now that this, we're trying to get out of this whole quarantine situation and deal with COVID as this powerful virus that is a danger to us working together. Have you what do you think about the new possible protocols that the industry is presenting to us in order for us to get back to work? And how do you think that's going to affect independent film? And how are like low budget films going to be able to adhere to all of these new guidelines? And how will it work on set? What do you think?
I mean, look, it is a complicated situation. This is my personal thoughts on it. And this is not by any means law or anything like that. Just kind of what I've been thinking about, because obviously as a producer, my number one concern is people's safety.
Yep.
And making sure people are taken care of. So the biggest thing that we have to figure out, and unfortunately is the slowest thing always in the industry, is insurance. What is the insurance going to be? And how do you safely insure what happens? And so a big thing in freelance filmmaking is that sometimes you have to come to work sick, because if you don't go in that day, you're going to get replaced, and then if the guy or girl that is replacing you for that day is better than you, you're not coming back.
Yeah, or you might not even have the knowledge, or you might be the only person with the knowledge to do that job on that day, and you basically have to come in.
Correct. So there has to be certain insurance policies in place in order for this to work. And a lot of that is going to become like, if you're sick, it's fine. You're going to get paid for the days you're out. Get us a doctor's note when you can. And, that's what it's going to be. Yeah. And then you're not in fear of ever losing your job or being laid off because of that. You're just like, yeah, I have to, and if your actor gets sick or your DP gets sick or your director gets sick, you have the ability to go to insurance and say, they're sick. Like, we have to take insurance day. Like, that's it. And there's already stuff kind of there, but insurance always takes the longest to catch up to the rest of everybody else. That's the only way you're really going to find true solves, because just, I'm not a scientist, so I can't really predict what the virus is or isn't going to do. What I do know, though, is that film sets are chaotic. And viruses are chaotic. So you can social distance as long as you want. We could all be wearing masks. We could all be wearing bubbles, and shooting with only 2 people. If someone gets sick and they get infected, that's it. Everyone's sick. Like, that's just what's going to happen. So, that to me is like, we kind of we have to get to the last part of it first, and then take the precautions, because we can take those precautions all day long. We have no idea if they're going to work or not.
That's true.
There's always going to be a % chance that something's going to go wrong. You do the best you can. So that's why I want to solve this end first and then work our way back to the starting position. In terms of your other question about like how this is going to affect, film, I do think it's actually, it's going to hurt and help. One, it's going to, as a producer, it's going to thin the herd in terms of the amount of product out there to sell. I don't know, Christian, if you've ever been to AFM, but it's 30 movies with Danny Trejo's face on it. Yes. And so you're just competing against like all these movies that are the same type of movie, and it's a crowded market. Back in the day, we could sell to the Japanese film market, foreign film market, and you could sell one movie for $50,000, and it would be like, oh wow, great, that's one market. Now you're lucky to get $5,000 for like 3 movies in a package deal. Same thing with like Netflix and all that. So that's going to help independent producers a lot, is that, if you can afford to make the movie and do it right and keep everyone safe, suddenly now you're one of the few people with content.
Yeah, hopefully that's it. You always like the people that say, oh, I hope there's an earthquake in LA again so they can thin out the traffic. There's too much traffic. Yeah, have another, or
Yeah.
that'll help the housing market. But it's a terrible thought but that's kind of the reality of the situation, is that some people are just gonna be like, you know what, this really screwed up my life. I need to go back to Minnesota and just live with my parents again and kind of refocus what I need to do with my life in order for it to be stable.
Yeah,
because this is an unstable business.
It's very unstable without a pandemic going on. So for me, I always just kind of look back on history and see, okay, what happened in history and what can we learn from that? And the biggest lesson that everyone should be kind of thinking about, just in terms of like, independent film and where we're going from now, is that after World War II, we had in America this giant economic boom, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people point to it being, oh, it was these policies and this thing that the government did, or like, this bill that was passed that made this big economic boom possible. And it's not any of that. What happened is that the entire world burned down,
mm-hmm.
except for the United States. So if you have a street with 8 factories all making shoes, mm-hmm. and everyone's buying, and you have to keep the cost down and all that, you have to competing with these, if you're one of these factories, you have 7 other factories to compete with making shoes. If 7 out of 8 of those factories burn to the ground and now there's only 1 factory making
mm-hmm.
it, they're going to do pretty well.
Yeah.
That's what happened to us. True. So with this going on, and like you said, the thinning of the herd, I don't like using that term because it's sort of morbid, but this does give a lot of power back to creators. You got a camera, you got a lighting kit, and you live with an actor, and you can just do it. Go make a feature. Now you have content. Now you can sell it, because suddenly the, factory that was just churning out pieces of crap that was just being, buy it, whatever. No one cares. No one cares about the story. No one cares who's in it. Just sell it. Now those are a little bit harder to make. So now a little bit more care goes into it. And now the creator has a little bit more power to be creative. Yeah. And that's going to be very, very helpful to independent filmmakers.
Yeah, well, we're going to see how this whole thing goes down over the next few months. So,
I could be complete full of
yeah. No,
don't
listen.
But
it's understandable. I get exactly what you're saying, and those thoughts are in my head. So let's bring on Josh and Rolfe and start the main event.
Sounds good. I love these guys.
All right, everyone. On the screenwriter side, he's the co-host of the podcast Best Movies Never Made, the host of the film screening series here in LA called Friday Night Frights, and also one of the writers of a little film that came out earlier this year. It only grossed $300 million worldwide, which is called Sonic the Hedgehog. What's up, Josh Miller?
How's it going?
Hey. Also, we have one of the most prolific filmmakers on the planet. As a writer, director, and or producer, he's made more movies than I can assume he can count, including Nothing's Out There, The Black Room, Art of the Dead, Automation, One in the Gun, Nightmare Man, and he's also one of the only writers that I know. He's one of one writers that I know that can write a script in 3 days. Let's welcome Rolfe Kanefsky. What's up, Rolfe?
Hi, how you doing?
I'm excellent, man. So, how have you guys been doing? Like, let's start with you, Josh. Like, what the hell have you been doing during this quarantine?
Just writing and not leaving my house. So, which when anyone who's a writer knows, when you're writing is a lot like being in self-isolation. So.
Exactly.
To a certain extent, my life's not a whole lot different than it would have been anyway.
Yeah, just no movie theaters.
Yeah, I can't go to the New Beverly, so that sucks.
Yeah. And Rolfe, how about you? How are you keeping busy?
Yeah, I've been trying to write. I got some assignments and been doing some spec stuff. And I'm now, I was in post-production on a movie before this whole thing hit. So it just started up again. So I'm now getting notes from the producers and trying to lock this picture, which is frustrating, but I'm hoping it gets done soon. So.
And what's that film?
It's called Pool Boy Nightmare. It's a Lifetime thriller.
Yeah. Wow.
Great title.
So into it.
Is the pool boy the nightmare, or is the
Pool Boy's Nightmare. Yes.
Yeah, it's not the
my
homeowner.
original title was going to be Dangerous When Wet, but they went for 4.9.
Yeah, Lifetime always wants to change the titles. We've all done them. I don't know about Josh, but we've all done them. That's kind of the Roger Corman Film School now.
I've heard a lot from Buz. How many titles did Psycho Granny go through again, Buz?
Psycho Granny had one title when we shot it, which was Granny's Home. And it had two. It was like Granny's Home and The Grandmother, because it was basically just a riff on the stepfather. And then obviously when you get it to Lifetime, they just go, oh, we'll just name this, I don't know, something Nightmare or Psycho Blank or whatever. But then they sent it back to us like, oh yeah, we're retitling it to Psycho Granny. And I just kind of looked at the email and was like, you done good, Lifetime.
Yeah. Well done, Lifetime.
That's a good title.
I'm totally fine. Their series of Psycho Blank, I think, is their best run. The Blank Nightmare, not so much, but Psycho Blank is always.
It's always rough. Like once you hear the final title that they're gonna give you, and I mean, I've had some stinkers of titles that they've given us, or like, man, the original title we had was so great, but it's their spot, their channel. They got to do it.
They named mine Twin Sanity, and I was like,
Twin Sanity.
I wanted to call it Separation Anxiety, and everyone was like, too heady. It's a good title.
Doesn't work for Lifetime though. Probably not. Maybe it would. I think that's Josh, what are you writing? What you just announced something? It was on in the news a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we're writing something that hasn't been announced, so we can't really talk about it. But then the thing you're talking about is called Violent Night, which is R-rated Christmas. They're calling it a heightened thriller, which made everyone think it's a horror movie, but it's actually an action movie.
Awesome. Really?
It's just a very strange action movie.
Somebody's better be singing Violent Night, right?
I hope so. I want a really creepy version of Carol of the Bells in there, but
that'd be great.
Any Christmas action horror genre movie needs a creepy version of Carol of Bells.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's start off that we're doing this screenwriters versus producers. I should have mentioned that Josh and Rolfe are going to be on the screenwriter side. Buz and I are going to be on the producer side. We're going to go head to head and discuss all these issues that we face.
Why is it got to verse?
Dealing with each other.
Work with them.
It is odd.
Yeah. Well, that's a title. It's a title that sells just like separation anxiety, right? Psycho Granny
or Screenwriter.
Yeah.
Psycho Twins.
So let's start off with kind of the basics with Josh and Rolfe. Let's start with Josh. There's a lot of difficult jobs on Earth. And writers can say, oh yeah, my job is really hard. Some say that it's easy. Some people think it's easy to be writers. What makes it so difficult being a screenwriter?
I'd say the difficult part is that it's one of the few important positions, or really any position on a movie. And obviously TV and movies are very different for writers, but for feature films, it's one of the few jobs where they can keep adding more people in. Editing is a little bit the same. It's not quite the same, because your average large movie usually cycles through many writers. It's still a little unusual to fire an editor and hire new ones, even though they will cycle through. But other positions, to think about it, like how many movies did they just be like, oh yeah, let's hire a bunch more costume designers, or let's get some more composers in here.
Some directors. We need more directors.
And so I think that's part of why writers get kind of the rep for having a chip on their shoulder. But it's because when a movie starts out, it's like you're super important. And then on some projects, all of a sudden you turn it in and it's almost like you found the script in like a dumpster. And you're like, hey, look what I found. And they're like, oh, thanks. And then you're like, I have some ideas. And they're like, why do we care what you think? You're just the guy who found it in the dumpster. Get out of here.
Yeah. We're going to give it to some other, we're going to give it to the trash man over here. Yeah. Who's going to take it and he's going to throw it in another dumpster for somebody else to find.
And we got this guy over here who's more famous than you. So we're going to pay him 10 times what you made to ruin the script.
Yeah.
Or we're going to pay him 10 times to just put his name on the script and you take an associate producer credit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rolfe, Rolfe, how is it difficult for you being a screenwriter? Writing is easy for you because you always have like 60, 70, 80 scripts waiting to be produced.
Well, not that many, but I write a lot. Well, there's two things because I'm a writer director as well. So there's the films that I write and direct. Obviously, you have more control over the whole project. So all the stuff that I've done that I've just written, and there's been more stuff that I've written that I haven't directed that's been made. That's where you kind of, as a writer, you have your vision, but it's never going to be your vision, and you just have to kind of step back and realize, the old thing has been if that you write a script, if at the end of the movie you can identify 3 scenes that you wrote, you should be happy. And that's kind of the thing. I've been luckier and unluckier in certain places about that, but you just sort of distance yourself from it and say, look, they're going to do what they do with it, and hope they don't destroy it totally. I was actually very pleased on a recent movie I wrote. I wrote a romantic comedy called Royal Blossom that was shot in Bulgaria earlier this year, just before everything shut down. And I wrote that script, and they wanted kind of like a 30s, 40s romantic comedy. And I went back and I did this one scene that was a total homage to like Pillow Talk, where they do the split screen, where they have a conversation and they do it. And like nobody does that anymore today. So I wrote in the script, that this split screen, because of the way the conversation was developed, it all is 2 conversations overlapping, and it's very complicated. And when I talked to the producer, I said, what do you guys think of that scene with it? They said, oh, we love it. We loved it. I said, did you understand it? And they're like, oh, yes. I said, the director understand it? I said, because this scene, if it's done right, could be great. And if it's done badly, it could be the worst scene in the movie. And I couldn't believe when I saw the cut, they did it right. They pulled it off. So I was delighted about that. So every now and then you get lucky.
Wonderful. And so Buz, as a producer, people probably think it's easy, right? Oh, what is it? There's just and it probably is easy for many producers that get credited on films. That might be the hairstylist of Mel Gibson, that connected that actor to money or whatever, or the producer,
Well, what Josh said,
or an agent.
What Josh said about it's one of the only writers you can add a lot of writers on and on and on. Yeah, same's true for producers, pal. And they do even less. At least with the writers, they're like, oh, I did like a scene. I'm Milius, and I did the USS Indianapolis scene. With producers, what Christian said is 100% true. Literally, someone could be like, yeah, I farted near Mel Gibson last week, and and the script fell out of my pocket, and now he wants to do it, so I'll take the producer credit. And then you end up getting one of those shared credit pages where it's just, oh, a lot of producers were on this, and I think everyone here will agree that the more writers and the more producers that are on a single title card, the worse the movie is.
That's very, very possible.
Well, I always like when, and granted, sometimes they are producers like Tom Cruise or Mel Gibson back when he was still making movies. But I like whenever you just see the actors' names pop up as like an executive producer, and you're like, yeah, they just had that put in their contract. They didn't.
Oh yeah.
They didn't do anything to help produce that movie.
And that's kind of a way to bury money in different ways too. So they,
Well, it is one of those things where a lot of that has to do with the way award systems are set up. And it's not so much just like the credit as like if the movie wins Best Picture or a Golden Globe or whatever, or even an Emmy in terms of TV, the actors don't get that award. They win an acting award, they get that. But if Brad Pitt produces 12 Years a Slave, Brad Pitt probably knows he's not going to win Best Actor for his little bit part in 12 Years a Slave, but it has a shot. And and it's obviously his company, so he wants to make sure his name is on there as an executive producer, so that when it inevitably wins Best Picture, Brad Pitt also gets to accept that award and share the gold, if you will. So that's a big reason why a lot of movies have. Obviously there's some actors that are just like, I want the vanity credit. Give it to me. There's also the actors that are smart, like Tom Cruise and Mel Gibson and, a couple others that are like, no, give me the producer credit so that I can bring in the people I want to bring in. And I actually have power to be like, no, this person sucks. We're not hiring them. Like, we're hiring this stunt team. We're hiring guys. You know,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
These women, like just across the board, they're allowed to be able to do that. It's a lot of it's just contracts and stuff is so complicated.
Yeah, it's not fun. I'm writing my own contract for a project right now, so it took me about a day and a half to really get it right. So
just
Buz,
hire a lawyer. Just hire one, Christian.
Yeah, I know. So a lot of people don't really know that what a producer does, Buzz. But in TV, the producer. Yeah, I know. There's so much to learn, but in TV, the executive producer is the boss. They're the ones that make the final decisions. When it comes to independent filmmaking, horror films, and all that, like kind of explain just in a nutshell, just a couple of the roles of producers and what they do, so people have a greater understanding of what's going on here.
Oh boy,
I know it's a loaded fucking question, but I said nutshell.
People should pay me for what I'm about to say. This is the simplest terms I can break it down to. Executive producer gives the money, producer finds the money, line producer decides how to spend the money.
Yeah. Hey, look at that.
There you go.
What about an associate producer? What's an associate producer?
That's the guy who's friends with the movie star that's in your movie, who got them to read the script in the first place. That's what I always think of as the associate producer.
Or found the location.
Oh
yeah. I've given that away before.
Don't forget
here's the nutshell.
Right line from State and Maine.
Yeah.
Remember the David Mamet one about associate producer? Tell the guy can be associate producer. His horse can be associate producer.
Associate producer is someone that knows someone.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
So on some of the recent films that I was doing, I decided to take associate producer credit, even though I was the actual line producer, because I was making so many movies and I was seeing the cast credits roll up the screen, and I saw a day player who was on set for 2 hours each movie, fucking day player above my name, and I was the one that did the most work on the entire film besides my boss producer. And I'm like, you know what?
Day player?
No, yeah, because the cast was before the line producer in the credits, how they were laid out, and I started getting really tired of it. I'm like, wait a second, I'm fucking still slaving over this goddamn movie, and like I want to get on the fucking front credits. So I was like, all right, give me an associate producer credit, and let me just be on the front credits for once, So that's why I took a lot of associate producer credits over the past year or so.
Next time you're tempted to take the associate producer,
even though I was the boss on set,
don't take the associate producer. All you take is a co-producer.
Yeah, of course. But we already had a co-producer. I couldn't take her slot, so I had to.
You couldn't take another.
It was political. Yeah, I couldn't. Yeah.
Well, the co-producer credit is always the political gimme credit. In that. It is like associate producer is someone that usually probably didn't do a lot. They knew a guy who knew a guy.
Yeah.
Whereas the co-producer is like, this person did a lot. We should throw him a bone, but definitely not like a producer bone. So maybe co-producer.
Yeah.
Not important, but important.
The producer bone is the one that you really want to hold on to and like hoard to yourself. Don't let anyone get it, because that's the main one. That's the main one that
it's a hard job.
Yeah, and people don't really understand how difficult it is. So
it also gets complicated because sometimes more than one company is producing something.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, where do you draw the line on who really is a producer, who isn't? Because I think even a further clarification of the difference between the problems for writers and producers is that producing is such an ambiguous thing for that credit. Like, really, there should be a bunch of we should invent new titles to cover a lot of the different areas of producing.
Well, we got time, Josh. Let's do it.
And especially even from like just a writer perspective, it'll be so funny to like go visit a set of a movie where you've met all the producers, and then you meet somebody and they're like, I'm one of the producers. And I'm like, no, you're not. What? Who the hell are you? I've never met you before. How are you one of the producers? And here you are standing in Video Village, introducing yourself as such. But again, that might be, they maybe like helped find the book the movie's based on. Like, you never even know where in the process that person did their quote unquote producing contribution.
Yeah, I mean, they could have been the one that shepherded it for 10 years and then just couldn't be on set for the time that it was allowed to be shot,
or they owned the rights. They were the option.
Yeah.
They just wipe their hand. I mean, it's even more complicated in TV, where the director of the pilot episode is an executive producer for the entire run of the series.
Yeah, like, they get paid for every single episode.
Like that's it. Like Mick G, the director Mick G of Charlie's Angels, Terminator Salvation, he is an executive producer on Supernatural because he directed the pilot.
Yeah, and there's like a tiered structure. Like after every episode, he gets paid, and it probably lessens after a while. But because he created the look of the show, he gets paid through the.
Well, then it's the same for, like, if Blumhouse produces something like a TV show, Jason Blum is going to get an executive, usually like one of the last ones. But as far as like actual work on the series, he may not know it exists. Yeah, exactly. Like because they do so much stuff, and there's certain things that I'm sure he is involved with, and other things that's just kind of like it fell under the umbrella, and that's just part of how his deal works.
Yeah. So touching upon that, Josh, you wrote a big studio film with a lot of players and a lot of, like, you have studio heads, you have Sega, you have producers, you have money people. What did you do as a writer to address everyone's concerns? And was there that one person that you had to answer to that you could trust, and they trusted you, that you said, okay, all the final decisions that are being done with what I do, I'm going to be filtering through that person, and then they're going to filter it through the rest of the people. How did it work?
Yeah, well, we on that project, sometimes what will happen is you have what, I don't know what other people call it. I always call it a point producer, which for us, there was a billion different producers and executives, but our primary producer was Neil Moritz, and his company Original was producing it. But Neil Moritz is a super producer, which for those who don't know means that, much like Jason Blum, he is making 5 billion different things of varying sizes, from the Fast and Furious movies down to like slightly smaller movies. So he obviously doesn't have the time to work on it. So he has a guy at his company. For us, was a dude named Toby, and he was our point producer. And I think probably point producers is just down to your personality. It's like how much they really want to be involved. And Sonic was something he spearheaded at the company, so he was super involved. He's like, I'm going to be there for all the decisions. And so he was the one who was always filtering everything from the studio or the other producers through us. And sometimes that's really annoying, either because the producer's incompetent or is being duplicitous, and in some ways it doesn't matter which is that they'll be getting a bunch of different notes and not necessarily tell you where the notes are coming from, because as a writer, you know who you have to listen to. If the head of Paramount Pictures gives you a note, you need to listen to that. If just one of the other producers who aren't that important gives you a note, maybe you can just be like, yeah, we'll try to address it. But Toby was really good at, like, he just wanted the movie to be good. So he would always be like, who cares about that note? Oh, we don't need to listen to that person. Don't worry about it.
That's such a good, like, development producer, creative producer, because I've worked with them before too, like just as like a one producer to another. And then they're just like, let's dogpile all the notes. And I'm like, dude, we don't need to listen to the kid that works in the office that read the script to do a cover sheet for. Like, no one cares that he's confused of why the main girl is eating nuts on page 10.
Yeah, he's probably never made a movie in his life. Probably didn't even go to school.
Well, one thing for it, I feel like it takes some getting used to before you kind of realize it, if you ever realize it. But there's so much politics going on at these companies, production companies or studios, and eventually you realize if you have 3 executives, because at first it's confusing of like, why are they giving notes that contradict each other?
Yeah.
But you realize that because possibly none of them outrank each other, or they just don't want to get into arguments because they're also working on so many projects. Because it's always just like, why don't they get into a room together and talk about this before they give us their notes? Like this note, I can't do both these notes. These are two different things. But it's because they don't want to get into it. They don't want to do the extra work to talk amongst themselves.
Yeah.
It is people justifying their jobs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The amount, and what's funny too is, Josh, is that you've done it long enough now. You know exactly what that note is.
Yep.
And I see it all the time.
You get the motivation behind it. You have to understand the psychology behind the note.
Yeah, no.
You know,
a lot of times I've been in development and I'm fielding notes, from a company, and then I'm talking to the writers, you know what I mean? And I have to like represent the company and make sure that the amount of times I get a note from somebody that's just kind of like, oh, is this in scope? And I'm like, that, like them getting their hair wet in the shower? Yeah, that's in like, fuck off. Like you needed to like, you skimmed it before the conference call and you saw that and went, that's weird out of context. Let me just write that down. And my job as a creative producer or a development producer is to be like, thanks.
Yeah, that means nothing. There are people sitting in offices around the country and around the world that need to justify their jobs. And when a script comes in, if it's a perfect script and they don't say anything about it, then why the fuck are they sitting in that office? And
there's no such thing as a perfect script. Everyone knows that.
Yeah, and there's no perfect script. So then, even if it's a masterpiece of a script,
except for David Mamet's 1998 script, The Edge, which is a perfect script.
Wow. Oh, okay. But they still need to. They want to justify, like, oh, you know what? That little moment in that movie, I was the one that put that in there. I forced them to do that because it was my girlfriend's name or whatever it might be. So, that's the kind of shit you have to deal with. There's just a lot of people that have never really made a movie. They've never scheduled a movie. They don't, they're just people sitting in offices.
Well, and it is important as I was saying, once you can identify I have to write some notes, otherwise what are they paying me for? And what are the real notes? Because of the ones that what are they paying me for, you really can just ignore. And they probably won't even remember that they give that, which was another trick that I eventually had to learn the hard way, was that it used to it offended my ego if someone would give, and I'm sure Rolfe, you get this too, where they give a note of like, I feel like this needs to happen in the scene. And you're like, that does happen in the scene.
Oh,
that
that's
thing you're saying you want to be in this movie is literally in there. And I used to I was so offended. I wanted that acknowledged. And eventually I was just like, yeah, just don't say anything. And then it's like, you listen to their note. Like, who cares at the end of the day?
Yeah. So go ahead.
I've done it as a producer is I've missed something and been like, hey, we should probably set this up, like why she has this phone in this scene and we've never seen it before, we should probably set this up. And then they'll be like, yeah, it happens on page 3. She literally pulls out her phone and looks at it, puts it back in her pocket. Mm-hmm. And I go, and I as a producer, I am fully in favor of being like, I'm an idiot. Thanks.
Yeah. You can't remember everything.
Sometimes you miss stuff.
Yeah.
Clear. I mean, I've seen it before where I'm like, in the scene, are we really getting the intention here that I feel like we need to know why she wants to kill her? And I'm like, oh, like the entire 45 pages that came before this, and this is the shift into Act 2. You're not getting that she wants to murder the person that killed her family? Okay. Read something else.
Yeah. So Rolfe, what are some of the battles that you have to face as a screenwriter, not as a director, but as a screenwriter, in order to try to preserve the vision that you have on a script? And obviously, when you sell something, you kind of lose the preservation of your idea sometime, and somebody else might come in, or when it's on set, people will rewrite it, or actors will rewrite it. But what do you do when you're dealing with producers to kind of, and what kind of things do they stop you from, that they don't want in your scripts? What are the problems that they have?
I have a lot of stories, obviously. One of the first ones that comes to mind was I was hired by Golden Globus.
Oh yeah.
Way back when. After they split, they formed two different companies, and Globus Senior, Walter Senior and Globus had a company. and they had the rights to a comic book called Zen Intergalactic Ninja, which I'd never heard of, but it was this. They hated the comic book, of course, as everyone did at back then. This was before all the comic book movies, way back. And I pitched something, and they liked it, and I got the job to write the script. And the thing which I almost never do, but they insisted that I send every 10 pages to them while I was writing it.
Oh no!
Which that's the only time I've ever had to do that, and I despised it. But so this is the thing. So I'm writing the script. I'm sending every 10 pages. I'm hearing no real notes. They're reading it. They're on the same page. I turn in the last 10, 15 pages of the script, and then they want to meet, and now they have the whole script. And I go in there, and what I pitched them was kind of Jackie Chan meets E.T. kind of movie.
Okay.
And they said, well, we like the script, but we want to be less E.T., more like The Crow.
Okay.
And I'm like, those are two very different movies.
Yeah, that's completely different.
We don't want you to change the story or the characters or the events. We just want you to change the tone of the movie.
The entire script, then.
The tone of the script.
Yeah.
So the only thing I could do was literally go through the whole script and add adjectives like, overcast and gloomy and dark and just fill it up with, because I'm like, the tone. I'm like, don't change the characters or the plot, but the tone. That was a weird one. So that was one.
Friend Connection, more like Finding Nemo.
Yeah, and this was after they'd been reading every 10 pages, so it wasn't like this. It was out of the blue. They were seeing it as they were going. So they never made the movie. Big surprise, but that was one.
I always love when they can give a one sentence note that blows up the entire movie and somehow not realize.
Yeah.
This isn't my own story, but I had a friend millions years ago was doing a sci-fi channel movie that was about a killer woolly mammoth. And he said that when he turned it in, the one sentence note he got was that they loved the script, didn't want to change anything, but they no longer wanted it to be about a woolly mammoth. They came back to they wanted it to be about a giant squid. Yeah. And somehow didn't realize that how could that be the same script if you go from land to ocean, whatever. But
holy God.
The worst thing on set, I wrote a low budget action movie called Red Line that had a star-studded cast of Michael Madsen, Corey Feldman, Dom DeLuise, Jan Michael Vincent, Julie Strain. It was and it was a script, and I was brought in, and I had 48 hours to fix it. It was like a 56-page script. They didn't have a third act, and I did it in 48 hours, and they liked it a lot, and they went into production. And there was this one big scene, the 7-page dialogue scene, which hinges the whole movie on it, and everyone was there. It's like, it was a Chad McQueen. Steve McQueen's son was the lead of the movie. So it was him, Roxanne Zoll from River's Edge, and then that's where they meet Michael Madsen, who's the bad guy, and Corey Feldman's there, and it's 7 people in the scene. And I'm on the set that day watching them shoot this thing, and the director was also the DP, and he was just in awe of having all these names in there, so he wasn't giving any direction. And Michael Madsen enters the scene about 3 pages in, and suddenly he comes in eating a banana. And then the actors started improvising about the banana, and Corey Feldman goes over this whole thing about the banana. And I'm sitting there watching the scene just get destroyed as they're just coming up with, out of the top of their heads. And then, of course, they have to go and buy 24 bananas to do all the takes, so they still have enough bananas. And the director doesn't say anything, and I'm just saying, the scene makes no sense. They didn't memorize the lines. They memorized half and then they just went off on tangents. And I was the only one, at the end, I went to Michael Madsen and I said, so, did you improvise this much on Reservoir Dogs?
Really?
And he goes, well, we had rehearsals on that one, and we had pre-production. And I said, oh, okay, yeah. And then Corey Feldman actually said to me, he goes, because he knew what was happening. He says, well, Rolfe, when actors improvise and it works out well, the writer gets all the credit.
Yeah, when it works out well.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there going, huh? And when it's terrible, it's like, yeah, this is a piece of crap. So that was that I was killing me because I'm a director and I couldn't say anything just being the writer, but I was banging my head going, oh my God, But, so that's Watching your work be destroyed, in front of your face.
I hate improvising in film. I hate it. I think digital filmmaking has made that so easy that every director and whatever just like is like, oh, just improvise it. We'll just keep the cameras rolling and I'll throw it together in the edit bay. And I'm like, you think they fucking made Ghostbusters one of the funniest movies ever by improvising every scene? Yeah. Fuck off. You get a line on a take.
Well, and that's what I always drove me nuts. I remember with the Austin Powers, especially the sequels, is you could tell, like you could feel where they would go off on these like ad-lib tangents, and then all of a sudden the scene would really awkwardly snap back to where the script can be, and it just like it would always pull me out of the movies. Even though it was funny, I was just like, there's a way to do this. Like I have a lot of respect for Jim Carrey because what he did on Sonic is he would basically ad-lib all his scenes, but the day before. Like he'd be like, hey, I have some ideas. And then, because they actually rehired us on the movie almost specifically they were shooting it in Vancouver. And the producer would like call us up and be like, hey, Jim's got a bunch of ideas for the scene tomorrow. He wants to say something like this. Can we get like 10 alts for this line? And we would kind of rewrite the scene, and then that would be the scene. Like he didn't want to like free ball it while the cameras were rolling. It was just kind of like
he's done that and it didn't work out well.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. It'll burn you out really fast. And to me, it doesn't make for a good movie. It's not funny that much anymore. You look at any of the, I don't want to throw the filmmaker under the bus, but we all know who I'm talking about, who makes 2.5-hour long comedies that are just as stoner buddies, riffing, just every scene, just like a bunch of riffs. And then they cobble it together in the edit bay. And then you have a 2.5-hour long comedy that has a loose story structure and a bunch of improv scenes. And it's awful. Awful. I mean, I don't know. Some people like it. It's their type of comedy.
Well, I think part of why Ghostbusters work, I always say about Ghostbusters is if you take out all the comedy, obviously it wouldn't be as good of a movie, but Ghostbusters will still work scene by scene as a like horror action thriller. The comedy is just on top of it. And that's what, like, so Bill Murray can do his little, also Bill Murray's Bill Murray. It's like, you don't want to set your standards by like, oh, one of the funniest humans who's ever lived. Let's emulate that.
Or let's stop him from doing what he does too. Like,
but it's also like, he was really the only one ad-libbing his stuff and he knows how to do it. Everyone else was just doing the script.
Yeah. They knew Murray was like that, which is why they would, they'd set him up for certain things like that. Same thing with like Belushi and Blues Brothers. They would just do little setups to make it be like, now you can say what's in the script, but then, maybe in another take, you can riff something and it'll work, as opposed to just like, blank Shmesh Schmogan says something funny here.
Yeah.
So I go back to the classic, one of my all-time favorites, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Yeah. That's
a script that it's a solid script that has a plot. It doesn't have to have Abbott and Costello in it. It works as a story, and then you put two comedians in there, and as it was supposedly Costello hated the script because they didn't get to do their routines, and he didn't find it was good. And then when they finally finished the movie and premiered it, his mother said it's the best thing you've ever done, and then he loved the movie. It wasn't.
It is their best movie.
Yeah, and it is.
It is.
Yeah, so Buzz, I want to touch upon this whole improvisation thing here because, I mean, okay, you have people like Mike Lee, who spends 2 months, and I don't know if you guys know Mike Lee's movies from Naked. Naked's my top 3 favorite movie, where he'll improvise for 2-3 months, and then he'll write the script based on the improvisation. Or you have somebody like Joe Swanberg, who makes movies that he just gives the actors a setup and lets them do their thing and lets them improvise everything on set. And some of these movies are actually really good. So you completely think that all improvisation is bad, or even like letting Will Ferrell loose on a set is bad?
It really, really depends. The problem with modern comedy, with this improv I'm talking about, is that it is people trying to be funny.
Trying too hard, yeah.
So there is an element of trying too hard, and that's why the improv doesn't work. Now let's look at Christopher Guest, Best in Show. or even Spinal Tap or Waiting for Guffman. No one in all of those movies are 100% start to finish or improv. It's literally just they wrote a treatment out, they set the cameras up, they do the fake interview, and those people become those characters, and they just start riffing as that person. Now, because Parker Posey and Fred Willard and Christopher Guest himself, those people are naturally very, very funny, but they're playing everything seriously. They are that person. Nothing they're saying is supposed to be funny. It's Leslie Nielsen in Airplane and Naked Gun. He's serious.
Totally straight.
I am a serious person with a serious thing happening around me. So when Parker Posey is saying, we need to get the busy bee. Where's the busy bee? She's freaking out. She herself is freaking out. It is hilarious.
Yeah.
But Parker Posey's character does not think it's hilarious. The problem with modern comedy in general with this improvisation and these types of filmmakers' movies is that everybody's in on it. They are all sitting there mugging with the camera, just going, all right, I'm going to make my buddy laugh here with this line. I'm going to make that, that's not funny. I mean, to some people, again, it is funny. To me, that isn't good writing. It's not interesting. Whereas writing the treatment out and giving a character a very well drawn, because that's what Christopher Guest does, is he tells them, this is your background, this is your past, now fill in the blanks. How does this person react to this question? And then they just start riffing on that, and suddenly that is, even though Best in Show is entirely improv from start to finish, it's one of the best written comedies of all time.
Yeah.
Because they drew those characters out. They wrote them to such a way that Eugene Levy can just straight up answer a question as what's his name? Fleck? I don't know.
It's been a while, yeah.
Catherine O'Hara and Eugene in that movie are so, when she does the walk and her legs all fucked up, it makes me cry laughing. I'm like, I don't know how she did that, but it's so funny.
I got to spend 10 years or so at the Tonight Show, and for the last 5 or 6 of those, Fred Willard was always on the show doing whatever sketches and whatever, and it was just the most amazing thing ever. Just be able to, especially during rehearsals, to get to watch that guy just fucking riff.
Well,
man.
he had one of those amazing things where you can't see the acting on his face.
Yeah, he's just like,
It really does just feel like this doddering old man just wandered in front of the camera.
Well, he's one of the few improv actors that he is a guy that's trying to be funny who's not funny, and then that's funny. So it's such a meta, weird style of comedy that he's one of the. I actually can't think of anybody else that.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Yeah, because it's just so confusing. It's confusing.
You look at Best in Show. He's the guy.
Yeah, his jokes are horrible.
He's like, oh, that she's giving her a real pat there, and the other guy's really uncomfortable, and it's a joke that he's trying to be funny in the movie, in context, but it's not funny, which is why we as the audience think it's funny. It's Michael Scott's the same way. That's another character that does it. And Michael Scott thinks he's being hilarious, and because he's not being hilarious, that's why it's so funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Josh, you talked about Jim Carrey. Did you have? I know I went to the Sonic. Buzz and I, we got to have drinks with you and talked about this after the Sonic premiere, or the first night it opened. What was it like working with Jim Carrey, and did you get chances to work with him on set and or afterwards, or?
No, I would, in some way, I would almost say we didn't even meet him until the movie was over, because he's the classic kind of funny guy who, while he's working, it doesn't seem like there's anything funny about him. He's really intense and focused.
And you want to leave him alone and let him do his thing.
That's the other thing. Well, also, too, it's we're just nobody's visiting the set. We didn't want to, hey, Jim Carrey, what's your favorite movie? Want to hear my impressions of you? I used to do growing up as a kid. We didn't have those kind of
pork and beans. Say, all righty then.
Yeah. Pork and beans. Me. So yeah, it was and also, it's funny that Buzz used the word burning out
I love that
about
you
him.
Mask for the quote.
Yeah. But because he goes so hard. I remember a director noting that at some point he realized that that's one of the things that Jim looks for from the director is to protect him by just eventually being like, no, we got it. Like, let's move on. Because otherwise Jim will just like keep going and going. Like, because I remember, you never know, like somebody who's been that famous for that long. I was like, are we going to get Marlon Brando on Island of Dr. Moreau, where he's just going to say like random words basically and be like, you can edit that get together into my line. But like every single setup, he didn't want to stop until he was able to do the entire scene in his mind flawlessly, beginning to end, almost like he didn't understand how editing works. Like that was why it was impressive. Like, but so it was just kind of like at some point our director would be like, no, we got it. That was amazing. Like, let's move on. I guess it's one of those moments where you can see how someone becomes like the most famous comedian in the world, is he just has that intense level of work ethic. It was pretty crazy to watch.
Precision. He had to do the whole scene every time.
Every time, from every setup. Like it didn't matter if you already got it. He also didn't do the thing where he wouldn't be there for the other actors' shots. Like he didn't go back to his trailer. Yeah,
he just as hard, right, on people's.
He just keeps going because
such a generous thing, because so many actors just don't do that anymore, and it's heartbreaking to me when I'm like, oh cool, you're making us do the tennis ball for your co-stars coverage. That's real nice, real good of you.
Yeah.
I will say all of his hard work paid off, and and I told you this after we saw Sonic, and I truly mean it, because I told you I would have lied to you, and I'm not lying to you now. It's Jim Carrey's best performance, I think, since Liar Liar.
I'd agree, and it was like what Rolfe was saying. Like we get so much credit for what was all him. Like even beyond just his execution, it's like he came up with a lot of his best stuff in the movie. But you welcome it because you want the movie to be good.
Yeah.
But going back to what I said about the Christopher Guest thing, you laid that foundation for him to run with. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so important about writing, is making sure.
And actually, looping back to, I think, the original topic, I think that really is the difference between the Judd Apatow, we can just say it. I love so much Judd Apatow stuff that I don't feel bad talking shit about his bad stuff. I mean, Freaks and Geeks is one of the best TV shows ever. Just that one season.
Yeah. We work in Hollywood. I try not to literally talk shit about anybody until
he's so good though. Like, it's okay. Mel Brooks made a million great movies and then an equal number of shitty movies. Like, it just happened. It happens once you get that level where you're just making that much stuff. But I think the difference is the concept of a foundation. There is a difference between I'm Larry David and I'm writing a detailed treatment for Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Apatow, who's an amazing writer and will write in a whole script. But then I think it's kind of like they just get carried away with the idea of how can we beat this scene, which is a good mindset to have, but you're not going to be able to beat the scene every time, every day. And then it's just kind of like knowing where to rein it in. I don't know. Like, because I think his process worked so well on 40-Year-Old Virgin. And then just, I don't know.
I mean, it's digital filmmaking. If Judd Apatow had to shoot on film and you had a producer that was going, you can't shoot another $10,000 worth of film for this 30-second scene. Please stop. Then you'd be like, yeah, walk in this funny way that I wrote, and now we're done and we're gonna move on. Whereas when digital filmmaking, it's like hit record, sit back, 4 hours later, we built a hard drive, we're good to go, moving on.
So Buz, as a producer, especially when you're line producing and scheduling and budgeting a movie, or at least putting that hat on, what are some of the things you see in a script that just really bug the hell out of you and make your life worse?
Oh, I got this.
Exterior night.
Here we go.
Although I will start this off with how many line producers does it take to screw in a light bulb?
I don't know.
Can't it just be a daytime exterior?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, that's my one line.
Ooh, that's a good one.
the most annoying thing, just as a line producer, as a producer, a creative thinking person, I don't think about this at all. So this is my huge lesson to you guys. Knock off the fucking continuous. Interior, this thing, night. And then this thing, interior, continuous. And then continuous. And then continuous.
Oh.
Stop writing.
Interesting.
It's so annoying. Just
Yep.
Just write the fucking story out and stop putting continuous, because then when I break it down, that just becomes a nightmare for me. And either just put night and we know it's continuous, or don't put anything at all.
Yeah, that's
and learn how to break up your scenes. If someone leaves a room, it is a new location, thus needs to be a new scene.
Yeah. That, I mean, I can understand that, but then also when you're first plugging in the script into an automated thing where it's gonna come into your movie magic budgeting system, the continuous is they if you don't put night or day at the end of it, it knocks out all of those, and you have to put them in by hand.
You add like 10 extra steps for us that we don't need.
Hours.
And we know it's continuous because you say she leaves the bedroom and walks into interior living room, continuous. Oh, no shit. It's continuous because you just said she left the bedroom and is walking into the living room. Fuck off. Like, just make it a new fucking, it's interior, living room, night.
I was actually even told on one script I wrote to get rid of anything that says morning, afternoon, evening, dusk, just day, night, day, night, day, night.
Exactly. Because the crew is not going to know, okay, morning is it 2 a.m? Then it would probably be fucking dark. What is, and then they might put in later. What in the fuck are you talking? Later. The worst is later.
Later at all like
never put in later. You just know you're just gonna hate this fucking screenwriter.
They know it's fucking later because it's a new goddamn scene. So
exactly.
Christian.
Fucking cuss all you want. God damn it.
I will say this. I like knowing that, and now knowing that, I completely understand and agree. The one thing that I've also learned writing, though, and it's confusing to wrap your brain around it, is because I feel like, we're all movie fans. We grew up watching movies, and I'm sure, Rolfe, you'd agree, is that it's when initially you start thinking of you're thinking about the audience. You're thinking about you watching this movie, the people who are going to watch this movie. And then eventually you realize, step one, that's irrelevant. The only people you need to think about are the people who are going to be reading this and hopefully giving it money, attaching things to it. So there's this whole extra step. And I just went through this on a project I can't talk about, but we were just going over and over and over this treatment to get it greenlit. And the moment it got greenlit, then it was like, okay, now what are we really going to do? We made it past that first stupid step, which in some ways has nothing to do with what the movie should be.
It's literally just the title. That's why the movie No Strings Attached got made, because the script floated around Hollywood and it was called Fuck Buddies.
Yeah.
And so everyone was looking down at their pile of scripts to read, and they were like, "Fuck Buddies, what's that? Gonna read."
No, American Pie was the same thing. I don't remember what it was because it was like a whole paragraph, but it's that was famously. It was aimed at the script readers. So that guy is a genius in that sense. He was thinking even before the producing level. He was thinking of these underpaid intern nobodies at CAA and stuff.
What is standing between a writer and a producer is these unknown, underpaid, sometimes not paid kids that are like, what is this movie? And they start reading it. They're 10 pages in. They're just kind of like, why is there aliens references? I've never seen Aliens. Trash. Don't care.
So my point is that we've learned that you kind of initially have to write your script so it's as easy to follow, as embarrassingly possible, and as sexy to read as you can make it. And then once you make it over that, okay, we're going to make this movie, now you start stripping it away. So your fight scenes are described as then Steve punches Dave, they fight, and you're like, that's someone else's job.
That's a stunt choreographer job.
Yeah, the stunt choreographer doesn't want my suggestions for what their awesome fight scene should be.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I mean, I started when I started writing scripts when I was about 14 years old, I started reading a lot of screenplays. I buy them at conventions and things like that, and to see what other people were doing. Now, when I started reading, because of course everyone was reading them because they made so much, they sold them for a fortune, the Shane Black scripts.
Oh, so good.
But those things, as a filmmaker, they annoyed me because of all of those asides. That I'm like, okay, you're writing something to entertain the reader that's not going to be on film at all. This is purely for the enjoyment of reading it, but
Like
it will not translate into a movie.
Like novelistic stuff,
deer
like
fact,
thoughts.
Deer fact number 101. When you hit a deer, you're supposed to pop. I mean, he would go off on these tangents.
The most famous one, Christian, is in Lethal Weapon, when Riggs and Murtaugh are approaching the house in Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
The way the action writes is Riggs and Murtaugh approach the most beautiful, expensive-looking house they could find in the hills. ... A house much like the one I am going to buy if I sell.
Yeah, I've heard
yeah, he's trying to make the reader laugh, and like especially all his descriptions are like that, where they'll just kind of like go off on this sort of meta.
Oh yeah. Oh, he had one in the couple make love. Then he wrote, "I'm not going to write this scene because one, what I find sexy is none of your damn business. Two, the actors are going to come up with something more creative than I can. And three, my mother reads this shit, so there." That was in the script.
It's like one in a million
scripts on some of these things. I was like,
not everyone's Shane Black though. So
only
like
one in a million can get away with something.
But also remember the script in 1941.
Yeah, million.
I've never read that.
That Zemeckis and Bob Gale wrote, and they wrote the action scenes, and literally the Ferris wheel goes off the pier with the biggest explosion you've ever seen, and then they have literally 3 lines of exclamation points, just exclamation points the entire page. And Spielberg read it and said, "I have to make this movie because the writers are so excited about this. It translates." So for him, it worked. So even it's bad writing in a lot of ways. Who's supposed to write 57 exclamation points? But it got Spielberg to say yes. So again, the rules of how you're supposed to do a tight script versus letting the writer just go off on tangents and entertain the readers sometimes works.
It's screenwriting is a lot like, and again, I'm speaking as a producer, but it is a lot like an offensive joke. If you're going to break the rules, you better be damn good at it. Yeah. Just like if you're going to say an offensive joke, you better be damn funny. Mm-hmm. Otherwise you're just breaking the rules, or you're just saying something offensive. Like it doesn't work. So I always think, if you think you can break the rules and make it work, go for it. But be confident that you actually know how to make it work. I do have one more tiny little suggestion, and I don't think you guys do this. But this is just for anybody listening that's a newer screenwriter, because I see this a lot with first-time screenwriters, or even people that are good but just haven't done it enough. Enter a scene late, leave early.
Yep, yes. Like Tarantino. Take out the goodbyes and hellos.
Oh yeah.
No, like every great screenplay ever written.
Yeah.
Tarantino did not invent that.
No, yeah.
That is a thing that from Citizen Kane. It's you come into the scene, the two people are in the middle of their conversation, and before they get up from their lunch table, you leave
out of it.
Do not tell me that they're standing up, paying the bill, and walking out of the restaurant. I don't need that.
My father made a point once, and he said, because my father was a film editor for 50 years on a lot of stuff. He said, not all movies, but most movies, if you cut out the first reel, the first 10 minutes of the film, you have a better movie.
Okay. Yeah.
If you get rid of the whole setup of the thing, just start it right into it. Actually, you'll be surprised it's a better film. It'll just boom versus setting everything up, establishing everything. Sometimes you just don't need it.
That's actually, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of classic films and films I love, they were made you would go to the movie theater. It was not it started at 7. All right, I'll wait for the next show. It was, I got there at 8. The movie started at 7. Here's your 5 cents. I'm going to walk in. And then you watch Bogey and Bacall looking hot on screen, and you don't give a shit. You don't know who killed the chauffeur. You just had a great time watching these actors do their thing, and scene by scene, it worked. You had a good time. And if you liked it enough, you stayed to watch the first half.
Yeah, just like television, if you turn on the TV and you're mid show and you're like, all right, fuck it, I'm just gonna keep going because this is interesting. Yeah, I never really thought about that people even before the television days and especially before the television days just would walk into a theater and just say, fuck it, I'm because we're all probably Nazis about it. We want to make sure that we see the first fucking frame of the movie.
And that was Hitchcock. They always credit him as changing that with Psycho. Because that was part of the advertising campaign was that you need to be there at the beginning.
Okay. Well, and the theaters were explicitly told by Universal, lock the doors. Yeah. Once the movie starts, no one is allowed to come in.
And that's how Showtime started. Because before it was just random, people would walk in any time. That's when they actually started Showtime.
Oh, really? Okay.
That was Psycho. Psycho began that. Yeah.
But I was going to follow up on what Rolfe was saying. I'd say that's the number one thing across all projects that my writing partner Pat and I kind of, I don't want to say get into like it's an argument, but it was a revelation that we had, and obviously Rolfe's dad had a long time ago, that we're always surprised that people don't realize, which is just we're always like, all this stuff we're talking about Act 1, you're giving us all these notes of all this setup we need to do. You are going to cut all of this out. You're going to shoot it all. You're going to cut all of it out. We can simplify things by doing that now in the script. We're going to save you time and money. We can make the movie better by acknowledging that, because just using Sonic as an example, if you're familiar with the movie, it's like the movie doesn't really get going until Sonic meets James Marsden's character. Mm-hmm. And we used to have 20 more minutes of stuff that happened in that town with them individually before they came together. Granted, I missed some of it. Some of it was really good, just movie, but it was also, while writing the script, we're all just kind of like, man, it takes forever for this movie to get to the part where if somebody asked you, what's this movie about? And you started explaining it, you wouldn't have said any of that stuff beforehand. And a lot of the best movies, like the Ghostbusters, they're basically already the Ghostbusters. They encounter a ghost in the opening scene, and then in the next scene they're getting, that's not literally. We see Bill Murray, doing his tests and stuff. Yeah. We so quickly get to all the stuff, and for people who don't know about movie novelizations, those were the books that they used to release that were novelized versions of scripts that kind of become famous for the fact that the people writing those were usually writing them off of the initial scripts, and they would kind of contain some of these deleted scenes. And if you read the Ghostbusters novelization, there's all this dumb bull crap about their personal lives. And Bill Murray's got a whole thing going on, I think, with Dan Aykroyd's sister. And there's eventually they're just no, we need to get them being the Ghostbusters.
Well, that's why one of my first things I'll do, if I get a script, and this is a producer, if I get a script and I'm guilty, the movie I directed, I did this and it was a mistake. It was a big thing. I should have sat down and figured out another way to do it. But I personally need start the movie where it starts to get interesting. If you have to do a flash forward and show something crazy that's happening and then flash back 2 weeks earlier, oh, hang on, wait, no, your movie got interesting there. So let's start there. I don't need to go back. So start the movie where it gets interesting. And I think that's a lesson.
Unless it's a murder mystery or something.
No,
maybe a murder. No, not even that. You don't want to tease anything.
I'm trying to think. There's one example of that movie of that type working, and I can't remember what it is.
Again, it works. It works when it works.
Oh yeah.
But you don't necessarily want to emulate that. Even a murder mystery, I think that's what Rian Johnson did with Knives Out, and I think he's even said that in interviews. Is he was like, well, what would happen if what they normally reveal at the end of the movie, I reveal at the end of Act 1? What's the rest of my movie if I almost immediately tell the audience who did it?
And can I still have expectations?
And we don't always do it because sometimes it's it's a joke you can say making fun of a movie, but it's also basically a movie's work of well, why did they do this instead of that? And the answer is because we need the movie to happen.
Correct.
Sometimes you do just need to say that. And there's a lot of great movies that really, if you had seen that script, like, I don't want to get into it now, but Back to the Future is one of the worst scripts ever as far as like following what we're told our basic screenwriting 101. But it doesn't matter because that movie just works because it's so much fun. The characters are good. But something my writing partner I'll try to do when we feel stuck, and if it's the kind of thing where we're like, well, we're kind of treading water up to this next plot point, it is, what if we just move it up? What happens?
Yeah.
What's the movie going to be like now if we get to this thing that we'd initially told ourselves, oh, this is our mid-act 2 crisis. Like, this is when the whole movie's going to take a left turn. It's like, well, what if we get to that 15 minutes in? Sometimes it is like, no. We need to, we need to pad this out. But other times your movie just gets more exciting.
So there's a similar process I do sometimes when I'm working with writers as a producer, and you know, if we get to a spot where we need to break something up and break through the scene and figure out, okay, this isn't working, so we got to rewrite this, and the writers are like, because you know, and you guys know this, a lot of times you get married to something, and you don't see the trees for the forest or the forest for the trees, and so you know, sometimes my job is to sort of clear the haze, if you will. And one of the things I'll do, and I'll tell writers this, that I'm like, this is what I'm going to do, is I start throwing out bad ideas. Like, straight up, like, well, what if he comes out and he decides to kill that character? And they're like, well, no, he can't do that because this needs to happen. Oh, all right, well, what if that character comes back as a robot? And I literally will just start throwing out bad ideas. 9 times out of 10, the writer's brains click into action and start fixing it the right way, because they're just like, no, we're not adding a robot to this talking dog movie. That's a bad idea. So this is how the talking dog now escapes from the pound. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's a dumb example, but like, that's normally how it works. Is that, and I do the same thing if I'm
Go
writing
extremes. Do the extremes. Then.
If I'm writing something and I have writer's block, I start writing the worst thing I can possibly imagine, and my brain corrects myself.
You do that. So just something that's completely outside of the box of the screenplay, you write it into the script.
Yeah, like I'm just, or not even like a style or anything like that. Like literally just bad.
The worst thing you could think,
like,
whatever comes
guy
up.
walk into kitchen, he's sad. You know, I'll just start writing bad stuff like that, and my brain just starts to kind of correct it, and then I go back and then I start re-editing it, and I go, oh wait, yeah, the man whooshed into the kitchen, you know, with his cap on, and said how do you do, Mom, and then he ran to his bedroom. You know what I mean? Like, it becomes something better because your brain automatically starts to correct itself.
You have to start thinking something. Rolfe, like, how is it that you compared to most people on Earth can write a script in 3, 4, 5 fucking days? It's 100 scripts are 100 pages. It's about a page per minute or so. What in the hell goes on with your brain that allows you to be able to structure an entire screenplay with like up to 20, 30 characters and 100 to 200 scenes? How does that work?
Well, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to say. I always was a writer before I was even writing. I would tell babysitter stories, and I just always had ideas. I watch a lot of movies, so you read enough scripts, you see enough movies, good and bad. You sort of get into the formulas of what they are, and I've always written from an audience point of view of like, am I entertained? Am I bored? So I try to keep it moving. But you fall into the formats. What was a little difficult for me was when I got into television, the Lifetime movies and the TV movies, because those are different structurally from normal theatrical movies or independents. Because the event that's usually supposed to happen on page 15 now is not supposed to happen until page 20, 23, because that's where the commercial break is. So, so I found myself having to fill up a little bit of time. Now I was saying this is always like 5 pages too long because it should have happened here, but you got to wait it out. And then you start writing for commercial breaks, and then things start changing. And then I was told even with international that on page 60, halfway through the script, you have to recap your movie because people might be turning in to the second hour of the film and just the first half, and you have to re-explain what they didn't see, which is terrible writing. So it's like it goes against like tight screenplay writing, and it was like, but this is for TV audiences with commercials, and You know,
But what I mean, what is it so it's a science then to make you to allow you to be able to do something in 3 days that normal people normally can't do in fucking sometimes 6 months.
yeah, I mean, every writer's different. I don't usually, a lot of times when it's an assignment I work, I do a beat sheet or a treatment that they sign off on so we know we're on the same page, and then I stick pretty close to it. And I go from there. But dialogue, I can write fast, and the events can spin out. I was working for one very low budget filmmaker who's made 200 movies, and I wrote a lot of scripts for him. And he was afraid to hire me at first because he thought I was too ambitious. But as a director too, I knew what was like no night exteriors, no, day for night looks terrible, all this kind of no dinner table scenes with 6 people around the dinner table, and you'll never film it. So I wrote these scripts that were, because he was shooting these movies in 3 days. So and he told me that my scripts were like almost director proof. That as long as they stuck to the script, they have a movie because it's all just there. And I was trying to avoid all the troubleshooting every problem you could have on a set and still make something entertaining, which is very hard because you find yourself writing more along filler than not, which is the worst thing to do as a writer. But, they don't want too much sex. They don't want too much violence. They don't want too much this. It's like, so what are they doing? They're talking. So everyone's got to talk nonstop,
Yeah, because it's a lot easier to just sit 2 people in a room and have that fill up 10 minutes of screen time. I mean, and I want to make sure I make a disclaimer that Rolfe doesn't write all of his scripts in 3 days, but he has the ability, the superhuman ability to do so. So, if you need one within a week, you call that guy.
I will say, because you might be listening to that being like, 3 days, probably not good. I have seen a movie that was written in 3 days, a film by a friend of ours, Gatto, Automation.
Really?
Yeah. If you guys haven't seen that yet, it is a great little I don't even want to call it necessarily horror. I guess it is because there's a killer robot.
Some gore.
Yeah, there's gore.
A little bit.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's so good. It's such a good little movie. And Rolfe, you did such a great job with that script.
3 days?
Well, that was the script. That story. Well, you know some of it. I talk about it on the DVD and Blu-ray. No, that was one where Gatto. It was after Hard Trivia. We talked outside for 3 hours. He wanted to do a chopping mall kind of movie. He told me he had one robot, and he wanted to do a whole dozen robots. And I said, "Well, how are you going to do a dozen?" And he wants to make this movie for nothing. He said, "Well, we can do CGI and duplicate the robots." I said, "No, don't do that. You have one robot, stick with one robot." I said, "Don't drive yourself crazy on your first movie." And then we said, "Let's make it more about the Beauty and the Beast love story between the characters. So it's, with love that kills." And I helped him. I wrote the treatment. He didn't have the money at the time, so he didn't hire me, but he did like the first 20 pages, and I read them, and I gave him notes on it, and we met once or twice. And then he was going to write the script. He ran out of time, so he wrote half of the script. And then he went to another writer friend of his, Matthew, who I never met until the screening, who wrote the second half of the script. And then, yes, two days before the table read, I was in New York, and they sent me the script, and I read it, and I told them it doesn't work. I said, it's 2 different writers, and you can see you stopped on page 52, and he took over, and one script has the humor and the heart that we were doing, and the other half just has all the action and horror and lost the humanity of the movie. And God was like, well, we have a table read in like 48 hours, or I think it was 24 hours. Can you do a polish and fix it? And I'm like, I'll do what I can. And I literally sat down there, and about 24 hours, I 80% restructured, flipped things around, moved scenes, rewrote dialogue, and that's what they pretty much. And then he made tweaks on the set and stuff, but it was a challenge. But I knew what we were going for. I knew who the characters were. I knew who the story was, and I knew what made sense or what didn't make sense.
It's the reason the movie works is this, because I was not expecting. This is another situation, Josh, where I was like fully prepared to lie, and be like, "Great job." And I was very happy. Like 15 minutes into the movie, I was like, I'm 100% on board. I care about this robot and its emotions. When like I don't know how that happens so quickly. Literally, you're just sitting there going, "Oh, that's what this movie's about." this is cool. Okay, I'm on board.
No, and Goddard did a great job on that film. I mean, for a first movie, it's a very low budget, but no, I was very happily surprised on that one too. And even the other writer who's like, there was no humor in my part of the script. You know, it all works, but it's like I didn't expect any of that stuff in there. But it's finding the characters and the motive. I mean, there was one little scene, like there's this scene where the robot's about to kill somebody, the creator, and the robot starts asking for a 401k and like vacation time and a new automobile. And I'm like, that makes no sense. The robot would never ask for that. The human who thinks that that's what matters to people, she's the one who can tell the robot, we'll give you a 401k and benefits. That's funny. But the robot doing it made no logical sense. I said, well, if I move the dialogue and put it in her mouth, then the scene will work. So it was stuff like that you just had to quickly, you know, and it played. So it was.
And you ended up being the producer on that, but you weren't technically the writer then.
No. I was.
You have writing credit.
We share story by credit.
Oh, you share story by
credit with them. I'm not the producer.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't on the set. I mean, that was Dan Bowen and Esther Goodstein were the producers on it.
Yeah,
with Gatto and his wife. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Buz, when you read a script, and a lot of screenwriters and first-time screenwriters may not know this, but as soon as it's in a producer's hands, especially a line producer, like nothing else happens to the script until the line producer is able to start the schedule and start the budget. But the line producer also has control to make sure that, like, okay, you have a scene where it's going from this room to this room to this room, and or inside and outside of a car. Explain some of the situations where you actually have to rewrite or put a new scene header into a script and like take control of a script and be like, oh, well, why is that day? Why is that night? Like, you know, those kind of things where you have to take control of the script as a producer.
I mean, look, I mean, as a line producer or as a producer? I mean,
as a producer, as a line producer, whatever, like, you know, especially like, I mean, a producer, line producer, you know, you're still always thinking of the budget. You're always thinking of the schedule, no matter what kind of like a real producer you are, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look, if I'm having an AD breaking down the schedule for me, I have told the writers, lock the script. Any changes, because look, the situation is a lot of times you have very little prep time. And so sometimes a schedule needs to be made while we're still making tweaks to the script. Mm-hmm. Simple as that.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's, hey, writers, lock the script. Everything else, put everything on revision mode. And any changes we have from the here on out, we just need to track. And then that way, if we send it back to the first AD, like, hey, we did changes to these, you know, scenes, the AD can go, okay, easy fix, as opposed to being like, shit, I got to start all over and, you know, break down the script, because now scene 12 is no longer scene 12. It's, you know, scene, like we inserted a scene there, and because we didn't lock the script, it went from scene, you know, 12 became 13, and 11 became the new scene 12.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as opposed to like you have 11 Apple or Alpha or whatever, and then you have scene 12. I know that's a complicated, convoluted way to go about it, but I mean, that's a lot of it just comes down to like, hey, lock the script. We're going to be working on it, still making tweaks to dialogue, whatever. We'll let you know if there's any big changes, and then the AD, you know, will break it down, or line producer will start to break it down in terms of just like, these are the locations, this is how much I'm thinking about, you know, stuff's going to cost, yada, yada, yada. That's the biggest thing, you know. Sometimes I do, you know, I will say, hey, make a schedule so that I know how many characters I need to tell the writers we're cutting. That's from a budget standpoint. And, you know, Josh, when you're writing Sonic the Hedgehog, you can probably have every waitress they run into have a line. Whereas when, you know, we do one of these little Lifetime movies, or Rolfe and I are doing some low budget horror movie, if somebody gave us a script and the waitress had a fucking line, we'd be like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, one line. Yeah, cut them out. Yeah, we pay SAG fees on that? Nope.
Pour the coffee and they walk fucking away.
I mean, the funniest thing about doing Sonic, though, is realizing how nothing actually changes despite the budget. Still wasn't enough time to do the movie. We were still cutting entire characters because of budget. Like it's still, you are correct. You can definitely get away with more just like this extra says one line.
Yeah.
This is more like, oh, we can't have this character because they're CGI, like that. But it still happens. Like they still tell you, no, just don't think about the budget, write the movie. And then you
not
do
in
it.
our world.
So I think that's like across the board. Like they always tell you that in my screenwriting class when I was in school. Every book I've ever read on screenwriting was like, don't think about the budget, just write.
You should always think about the budget.
Yes.
Like even on a big budget movie, you should still be thinking about it. Like there's no reason not to, because in some ways that can drive the creativity.
Correct.
Like some of the fastest things I've ever written are the things that were most hemmed in. Because the problem when they just blue skying, in some ways that's where the writer's block comes. You're just like, oh, I can literally do anything. But if they're just kind of like, well, we're going to have this many days, you can only have this number of characters, this number of locations. Sometimes that's when you can just be like, boom, 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 knock it out. Because when you get to that intersection, you're just like, well, what are the two ideas I have here, which might paralyze you normally? You're just like, well, this one's super expensive. Let's do the cheap one, or,
Limitations, the birth of creativity.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, I had one on one Lifetime. It was a murder mystery in a sorority, fraternities, college thing. And there's lots of college people there. So there's scenes with the frat guys and stuff like that. And they're like, nobody can, we can only have 4 speaking parts or whatever it was. So that turned into every time they went over there, their guys were there. It was hazing and nobody could speak because they were under the hazing ritual. So they could just point because they weren't allowed to speak. We're hazing. So there you go. That's why no one talks. It works. They got a little dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah. So Buz, we'll start to wrap this up. Like, what is the best advice you could give a budding screenwriter, or even somebody who's maybe had a couple of scripts made, for a producer standpoint? Like, what is the best thing that writers can do to make sure that their film is going to get made, their script is going to get made?
It's very easy, but it's complicated. very, very carefully. 85 to 90 pages.
And that's it.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
No, okay. What if you have 100 characters in that?
It's going to take a while to read it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you want to keep it short. That's an easy one. But some of the other ideas, like, okay, as a producer, you understand, like, you're gonna hold on, let me make sure okay, I have my girlfriend wants to walk by. We have to go into background mode. But the amount of characters that you have in your screenplay is a big deal, because that's how many people with dialogue lines and party scenes and extras.
We get to that later. For me, you want me to read your script? That is first step. First step for any screenwriter, getting someone to fucking read your script. You want someone to read your script? 85, 90 pages.
Yeah.
They don't know how many characters are in it. They don't know anything else. They don't know what the story is. But I can tell you right now, without reading a concept, a synopsis, even a title, if I see it's 90 pages long, I'm already more on board with reading it than anything else. Now, you add on a catchy title and a catchy synopsis, even better. But if you starting out with a 110-page script, chances are I'm not even going to get to those other steps. I'm probably missing good scripts because there's tons of movies out there that I love that are over 90 minutes.
Yeah.
But as just a reader and a producer, I go by Hitchcock. A movie should only be as long as the capacity of the human bladder.
Oh yeah. And so Rolfe, as a screenwriter, you do everything. But what would you wish that producers did more when you presented a script to them? What is it that really you wish they would do more of?
I wish producers would do more.
Pay for your scripts more, but
no, this is great. Here's a check.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, paying is good.
Yeah.
I have trouble with the pain. Right now, I'm dealing with the pain again. Like, waiting.
Yeah. Okay, conceptually, that's a pretty broad question. So
what
yeah,
I tend to find a lot of times with producers on some of the level I do is that there's a lot of very lazy producers that just, they want something, they ask for it right away, then they don't get to it forever. It takes a long time to read it, and if they read it, they skim it and they don't really pay attention, and then they get notes at the last minute where things could have been solved way before if they would have waited until production started or whatever, saying we have a problem, but they never paid attention to it. So I had one quick story I had was that I wrote this Christmas romantic comedy, and they wanted the script in like 8 days, and I got it to them like in 7 days, and then I was supposed to get notes in 3 days, and I didn't hear anything for 2 weeks, and then finally I emailed them and they said, oh, well, we got so busy because the script was so good, we just went right into pre-production. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's good, but we will have some notes. And then they cast the movie, they got the locations. 5 days before shooting, they're shooting the movie in Bulgaria. They say, okay, here come our notes. There are 4 sets of notes. The red notes are from me. The green notes are from our sales team. The yellow notes are from the director. And the black notes are from the other producer who just read it. And I'm like, we start shooting in 5 days. We have the whole cast locations. You can't change anything, but here, try to do the best you can on this. And I'm like, and I literally like almost had a breakdown, but I read it. It wasn't as bad because luckily one producer had not read the script till the last minute, and he didn't like the script. He wanted a romantic drama, not a romantic comedy, but all the other notes were kind of explaining why the script works as it is and why all the actors like it, and let's just shoot it. So I did have to make changes, but it's literally just disorganization. If there's constant communication between the writers and the producers and everything, it's so much smoother. You get them on the same page. It's when people just wait till the last minute and then throw it on you. And then they always do. We need a emergency rewrite, in 2 hours. Yeah. Give us brilliance, Yeah, my favorite story, I guess, I don't know if you know this story, was the end of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Uh-huh. Did you know this one?
No.
What? The end of the movie, the final thing in the movie where the glass elevator crashes through the rooftop, and Charlie says like "we" or something like that, and they're like, we're not ending the movie on the word "we," They said we need a line. Now the writer at that point was on vacation in the middle of a town in the middle of nowhere. He's walking past a phone booth that starts ringing. He went to the phone booth, picked up the phone, and it was for him. It was the producer who said, okay, we're shooting the last scene of Willy Wonka. We need a perfect last line for the movie. Wow. And he's like, like right now. He says, okay, how about Charlie? Don't forget what happened to the boy who got everything he ever wanted. What? He lived happily ever after. Like, perfect. That's it. And that's wow. Boom, and that's the movie. I just there's a writer,
So before we finalize it, I want to ask Josh one last last words, but I want to make note that I was working probably 10 years ago on a film. I got asked to be be a truck driver, and I didn't fucking know, barely knew how to drive much trucks, and I had to drive 8 fucking trailers that I had, like Star Wagons, that I had never ever had to tow before in my life. I learned it within minutes as soon as it's a whole story if anybody wants to ask me later. But I'm on fucking set. It's one of those things where it's like pickup shots. I didn't know what the movie was. I didn't know who was directing it or anything. I knew Denise Richards and Pamela Anderson was in it, and it was called it was called Blonde and Blonder. That's all I knew. So I'm setting up their trailers in a configuration so they could be on set. So like 1 or 2 days into this, and I'm not even on set, I run into fucking Rolfe Kanefsky, and I'm like, "What in the fuck are you doing here?" He was like, "Yeah, you know what? I wrote this fucking script, and they didn't even fucking tell me they were filming it until like a few days ago, and they already filmed like most of the whole script, and who was the fucking director? And I didn't even know it. Bob Clark. Bob Clark's last movie was that. And so as soon as Rolfe actually told me, I was like, wait a second, I'm just a grunt. I don't even pay attention. I'm not even paying attention. I was like, holy fuck. So I got to talk to his AD. I got to talk to his son. and his son and him both perished within a month or two after that in that drunk driving car accident. Yeah, in the middle of post production in that movie.
And they took his name off the movie.
They did.
They did
off the movie
because it was a Canadian movie and he'd lost his residency because he was living in L.A. So they were substituting content. So in order to get the $2 million back for the investment for the producers, they took his name off of the last movie he ever directed. Yeah, it's
seemed very Canadian.
It's horrible.
I always thought Super Baby Geniuses 2 was his last movie. So it's
Blonde and Blonder. Not much better. It was Blonde and Blonder.
Yeah, and Rolfe didn't even know that the film was filming until he heard that it was filming reshoots in L.A. and that's where I was.
Well, I heard a couple days into production because
you did. Okay,
they didn't buy the script.
It was Canada.
They had optioned the script and they hadn't purchased it, and literally we could shut the film down. It was like an $8 million film that I could have stopped because my lawyers. Then they finally did pay me. They didn't pay me. They forgot to pay the writer. And I was like, you optioned it, you didn't buy it, you're making the movie now. What, it was very bad producers in that one. Yes, very, very corrupt. The director who took the name has two different names. He has a different name for director, he has a different name for producer. So when you have your producers, different aliases, you're some sleazy things.
Yeah, so Josh, we have about 2 minutes left here. Anything you want to say about producers and the way that their world can make your world better?
I mean, recapping, I guess, kind of what we talked about a while ago in the conversation. I just think, as we were noting, what Buzz was saying, there's so many different types of producers and things they're doing on the movie. But for anybody whose kind of career goal is to be a Neil Moritz style, like you just want to be a producer, you want to be one of the best, you want to rise to that level where maybe normal people even know your name. Granted, normal people really only know actors, barely even know directors, and that's usually it. It's crazy for a famous screenwriter. It's almost not a thing that exists. But if you want to be a good producer, I think it's I remember a long time ago, somebody explained the reason that you should baby actors, because that's something everybody complains about is, divas and just like all this stuff with the actors. But it's like, well, think of it this way. It's like, they're on screen.
Yeah.
If one of the grips had a bad day, nobody knows because their attitude is not showing up on screen. An actor they have to have it going on. So if you just put up with their bullshit as much as you need to, get it up on screen, that's the important thing. But I think from a producing standpoint, that really trickles down to all the departments. And like Rolfe was saying about that horrible notes draft with all the colors and stuff, it's like the thing you don't want to do. Like, just super short example, I was working on something where we had two producers, same company, but there's just a bunch of producers. We had two on our project, and like the studio was hounding us to get the draft in super early. And one of the producers was clearly in a panic because the studio was calling them. Like, we didn't talk directly with the studio.
Yeah.
So they're getting pressure that they need to apply to us. And she was like letting us know the level of pressure she was under, which was stressing us out. And then just randomly in the thread, one of the other producers chimed in with, don't worry about it, we'll handle it. And that was all it took to calm us down. And I think that's what a producer needs to do, because to a certain extent, and I think it's why producers don't get some of the credit they should, is that they're doing that thing that nobody understands. Like, it's not, I don't want to say it's not creative, but it's not a department you can easily wrap your head around, which is why they can just keep endlessly giving out credits to just anyone who does anything, because it's not an easily identifiable thing. But I think the thing is, you're in charge of fucking getting this movie made, and part of that should be calming everyone down.
Yeah.
So that they can do their fucking job, and you're the one freaking out.
Well, you need everybody doing the best job they can.
Exactly. And people can't do that when they're freaking out.
Yeah, and you need to be able to deliver the best product you can. And so you get the best product if your people are happy. And if there's a bunch of infighting and people are, you're right. It's our job to kind of step in and be like, okay, everyone calm down. You shut the fuck up. You shut the fuck up. when you have a problem, come to me. When you have a problem, come to me, and I will filter it and we'll talk. And now you guys never have to talk to each other. That's sometimes not the best way to deal with confrontation, but in film, a lot of rules kind of fly out the window in terms of how you're supposed to handle, stuff like that, because you have to be like, I cannot fire this person per their contract. I cannot fire you because you brought in these actors. And so your guys' shitty attitudes are going to have to, we're going to have to be able to stand it. Unfortunately, that has led to some pretty awful stuff happening in the industry. That's why a lot of this shit has happened, is because you can't get rid of the executive producer for sexually harassing, because then the movie falls apart and then you don't have a job and then everything goes away. So that's, that goes back to like, we need a better insurance policy where we can come in and say, no, I don't care. I've shot half the movie with you, actor A. You just, sexually harassed that person. Now you're fired. And the insurance company is going to give us X amount of dollars to reshoot all of your scenes. Bye-bye. You have no more power anymore.
Yeah. Take your movie away.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to thank all of you, Buz, Rolfe, and Josh. This was a pretty badass episode of the podcast, so I want to thank all of you for that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people learning a lot from what we're discussing today. So, thank you all, and I hope to see you guys soon. I don't know when. Who's gonna be the one that like breaks the rules and throws the party?
I'm having a party right now. You guys are welcome to come over.
Yeah, all right.
Let's do it. All right, I'm doing it. All right, thank you guys, and we're out.
Thanks, Christian.
All right. Thank you all for listening to My Favorite Horror Movie. Please subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and catch our videos on YouTube. All of those links and ways to pick up our books are at myfavoritehorrormovie.com. My Favorite Horror Movie is a Black Vortex Cinema production. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon, evil ones.